Hi, this is Shupriyo from shupriyopanda.com, and now we are going to talk about part 2 of RBI Grade B interview preparation. So today what I want to do is take you through the various hot topics which are extremely important for 2019 interview. You have to understand that every year the RBI panel will be asking you about questions on various kinds of hot topics which pertain to the economic and the financial events that have taken place in the country. So some of these topics would be very heavy and they might be opinion based as well. So you need to have a deep understanding of each and every topic. Now, whatever hot topics that I'm going to discuss in this video, it's not going to be an exhaustive discussion of each of the aspects of these topics because I'm trying to keep it short. I'll just give you a brief snippet of the various kinds of news items which I think the panel might focus on this year. So later on in future videos, we'll talk in depth about each and every one of these. So let's begin. The first thing that we have to focus on, which is an extremely burning issue in the country right now, is the CAA and the NRC repercussions. It's the Citizenship Amendment Act and the National Register of Citizens. There is another thing, the NPR, the National Population Register, which is actually not something related to these entities, but it has been brought into the fray. So now the discussion on CAA and NRC, it's not going to be completed in a short span of time, and it will take a long time. So for CAA and NRC, I think I'll need to make a separate video. And there are a lot of opinions. People are very sensitive about these topics. So what the panel might do is try to nudge you on these topics and try and see whether you have those preconceived stereotypical answers. So don't fall into their traps. You can't become political when you answer these questions. It's quite important that you read about these things in depth and then you form your opinions. And when you present it to the panel, you have to have a balanced outlook. So I'll tell you a lot about it later on. Just try and read as much as you can about this. Put your opinions aside and just read the viewpoints from every angle, from the pro-government angle as well as from the anti-government angle, and try and form a good opinion. So once I discuss it on that video, you'll understand the concepts better. So this is with the first one. The second one is the US-Iran tensions. Now, in the last couple of years, after Donald Trump had taken a lot of steps to actually antagonize Iran, the relationship between US and Iran has soured a bit. And after the US backed away from the Iran deal, things have always been tense. And right now, as we speak, the tensions are still ongoing. However, thankfully, Donald Trump has not declared war on Iran, even though Iran had launched a couple of missiles on some Iraqi base, which also had US troops. However, there has also been a report where Iran had shot down a civilian aircraft because of these tensions. So there was a talk of even World War III, and it was going to that extreme. And US might get into another long and protracted engagement with another Middle Eastern country, which would totally destabilize the region. And the thing that the panel will ask is, how does this impact us? So you have to understand that US is an ally to India, and the strange thing is that we are also allied with Iran. So foreign policy wise, India cannot take a stern step and it cannot take a side in this tension. So we have to have a balanced outlook, and when we are answering, we have to say that we have been using Iranian oil for a long time, and for India it would not be in her interests to actually antagonize any one of them. Because of this, the issue has been long discussed in the media, and I'll also talk a lot about it later on. Third thing that we have to focus on is the Australia fires. Now there have been various different camps Some say it is because of climate change, others are saying it's not because of climate change. In fact, the Australian government put out a press release where they said that this is not due to climate change, but most of the people were thinking it's because of certain political interests being hampered. However, after a lot of research done by the scientists, they have come to conclude that there is a direct correlation between climate change and the Australian fires. As you'll recall that a few months ago, we were concerned about the Amazonian fires, which happened in Brazil, and also about the Californian fires, which happened a couple of years ago. So these instances of forest fires have been increasing a lot in recent years, and some of them have been attributed directly to climate change. So the panel might ask your opinion regarding climate change and how it can destabilize even the economy of a country and even a continent. Like in case of Australia, the entire continent has been affected and millions of hectares of land have burnt away. Read about it. We'll talk about it later on. The fourth thing is the GDP growth rate of India, which is now the lowest in 6 years. The forecast that the NSO has done for 2019-2020 is about 5%. So this is an 11-year low. And the last time it was so low had been around financial year 2008 to 2009, where we had a growth rate of about 3.1%. As you'll see, the various quarterly growth estimates have also been hampered a lot, and we are not performing as much as we should as a growing economy, as one of the leading developing economies, emerging economies in the world. So what has led to these things and how can we rectify it? What is the solution? The interesting thing about the GDP growth issue is that even though our growth is stagnating or it's coming down, at the same time, the markets, the equity markets, they are witnessing a very huge spike. So the equity markets are outperforming all the expectations of the analysts. However, the GDP growth rate is actually just pulling us down. So what is this dichotomy? Like the market's high, but the GDP is going down. So why is this happening? We need to discuss a bit about that. So please read on that. I'll talk about it as well. The next thing is the economic slowdown. So this has a tie-in with the GDP issue that I was talking about. So there had been some remarks by a couple of our ministers about the auto sales and how millennials are not buying automobiles and instead they are renting them. We are in a position where we can easily understand the mindset of millennials, right? Because we usually don't want to buy stuff, we would rather rent stuff. And with the proliferation of Ola and Uber, it's not really required right now if you are living in a city to get a car. Even if you want to take a car out for a spin, you can go to Zoom Car or any of the other apps and you can just book one, go have a drive and come back. So that's why the millennials are in a different frame of mind regarding this. So that's a point to discuss about. The next thing is the GST collections of December. So as you all have read by now that in December, our GST collections have crossed 1 lakh crore rupees. And this is a huge deal because not every month we are able to touch this figure. So what does it augur for January collections and for the entire financial year as a whole? We need to study about that. The next thing is the appointment of General Bipin Rawat as our first Chief of Defence Staff. Now, India before this did not have a CDS, and now that he has come into place, how will it affect our army capability? So we need to understand what this appointment will mean for the rest of the economic scenario. So the next thing that we have to talk about is the IBC rejig to improve the EODB. So the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code has undergone a change proposal because the government wants to improve our ease of doing business. As you can see, we were about 130 in 2016, but very rapidly our score in EODB has improved, and right now we are standing at number 63, which is a huge deal. So this is a very important thing right now in the economic aspect, that what is the government doing to improve our ease of doing business. The ninth thing is the 6 factors of EODB that India is focusing on. So you can make a note of it. We'll discuss it later on as well. It is enforcing contracts, resolving insolvency, starting a business, registering property, paying taxes, and trading across borders. So these are the 6 factors that India is focusing of the ease of doing business parameters. Now another thing is that the World Bank will look at Kolkata and Bangalore too. So it's not just Delhi and Mumbai that they are going to look at, but they are also going to have a different survey for Kolkata and Bangalore to arrive at their rank. I think it's because we have been making strides in our rankings, and they want to understand whether these developments are happening only in the major cities or across the board in different parts of the country as well. So that is why they want to include 4 cities and not just 2 for preparing the ease of doing business ranking. The next thing is that EODB now will be having 2 new factors. So initially ease of doing business was calculated using 10 factors, but right now 2 new factors are going to come up. They have not been used in the 2019 rankings, but they have been announced. 2 of them are employing workers and contracting with the government. The next thing is the center's 102 lakh crore mega infrastructure push that they are doing to achieve a $5 trillion GDP by 2024-25. Now this is quite an optimistic plan of the government, but they might have some various calculations that they are doing internally. So the target has been put as 2025, by which we need to have a $5 trillion GDP. So the next thing is the Kudankulam reactor, which was recently hacked by North Korea. So why is this important? Because India has the highest amount of thorium in the world, because we can have thorium based nuclear reactors, and it is an extremely good alternative to uranium based nuclear reactors. And another thing is that with the thorium based nuclear plant, that fuel, you cannot make a bomb with that fuel. So the energy needs can be solved, but at the same time you cannot enrich it for a fuel. And another thing is that we can also reduce the nuclear waste by using thorium based nuclear reactors. Some of the people were actually talking about how it's going to be white gold, and since India has a lot of thorium, we need to handle this thorium properly and channelize it so that we can offer it to the world, and that's why we need to develop the thorium based nuclear reactors as well. So that's that. And the next thing is the WTO leadership, which has really been crippled recently by the US, because they are starving it of funds and they are not even filling the vacancies. All of this is happening because the US had a hegemony over the WTO, but right now, because of a lack of leadership and a lack of leadership will, they are actually abandoning the WTO. What will it do to international trade? What will happen now that the WTO is unable to decide disputes? Then will we go back to a law of the jungle? The next thing is Sanna Marin, the youngest Prime Minister of Finland, and her landmark 6-hour workday announcement. So as you know, she's the youngest world leader right now at around 35 years of age, and her announcement recently about 6-hour workdays, and not only this, she wants a 4-day 6-hour work week. So it's quite a new thing that has come into the fray, and something that we all need to look at and talk about the pros and the cons of this kind of a work arrangement. The next thing is about the Bolivian coup, where the current reigning president had been removed, and why is this coup important and how is it linked to lithium? So I told you about thorium, which is called white gold, but there is also lithium, which is another type of white gold. And why is lithium important? Because it is the fuel on which the entire electric car industry is dependent. So there have been a lot of write-ups about this in the media. Some of them are saying that American companies want to secure that lithium, and initially they tried to secure it, but the president did not allow it, and that's why some of them might have tried to actually orchestrate this coup so that they can lay hands on the lithium and use it to make the lithium ion batteries, which are very important for electric cars. So The next thing is the Saudi Aramco IPO. Now, this is something that had been in the news since a long time, even since I think 2017-18 we are hearing about it. So what is Saudi Aramco? It's the Saudi official oil company which is owned by their government, and their valuation was recently tagged at about $1.88 trillion, and it has actually surpassed the valuation of Apple, which is the biggest company right now in the world. So why is Saudi Aramco important? Because initially in this IPO, there were lots of hopes and international investors had tried to put in their money. But right now what they found is, due to the instability in the region, people were saying that Saudi Aramco is not a worthy investment. So what happened was, Saudi Aramco initially had targeted the IPO to the international investors, but once the international investors understood that it's not going to be a feasible investment, they targeted their domestic investors, and mostly domestic investors have bought into this IPO. So what are the repercussions and discussions regarding that? The next thing is the WeWork IPO failure and the impact on the Vision Fund. WeWork is one of the latest unicorns. So what is a unicorn? I hope you know what is a unicorn. It's a startup which has a valuation of $1 billion or more. So WeWork was one of those startups, and their IPO has failed spectacularly. One of the biggest funds which had put in money into WeWork was the Vision Fund. So this IPO failure also reflects on the decision of the Vision Fund. And the Vision Fund, right now it has invested in about 88 companies. And there was a lot of talk about how their big investments are turning out to be a dud. And you have to understand that Vision Fund is comprised of money from a lot of places. It has money from the Saudi royal family. It has money from SoftBank. These are the major investors, and there are other investors as well. So this is one of the biggest funds right now. And if this fund is unable to turn a profit, then how are we going to look at IPO valuations of startups in the coming future? What will it do? Especially people with a startup profile should read a lot into this. And the important thing about this is that the Vision Fund was making investments mostly using debt, and it was unable to get profitable exits from using that debt. So using debt to invest in IPOs, is that a feasible strategy, or should we only try to invest using equity? So this is something that we need to analyze. The next thing is about the Nobel Prize. The panel has a habit of asking questions like who won the 2018, 2019 or even earlier Nobel Prizes. So make a list of the economics Nobel Prize winners, especially from 2016 up until 2019. And as you know, Abhijit Banerjee, Esther Duflo and Michael Kramer had won the economics Nobel last year. So how did he win, and what was his work about? So it was about RCTs, which is randomized controlled trials. It's quite important to understand how RCTs are a completely new thing, and it's a game changer basically, and it changes economics as we know it. So we have to understand how it's different to traditional economics theory and how it helped Abhijit Banerjee to create these models that would help him understand how the poor spend. And this has been extremely useful for policymakers, and many countries have actually adopted it to try and target the poor. So you have to understand the small versus big and the gossip versus the models, the things that he has done. So I'll explain it in a future video. There's also a YouTube video, so you can check that out if you want, and you'll get a little bit more info. The next thing is Boris Johnson's win. So this is something that is important for Brexit, because this has been the biggest Conservative Party win since 1987. And as you know, Britain had voted for Brexit in about 2016. So about 51% of Britons had actually voted to leave the European Union. However, there has been a stalemate because of certain things like the backstop, the Irish backstop, Northern Ireland and those problems, and many other things. So basically they were unable to get Brexit done. So Boris Johnson has won a landmark ruling, and people have reposed faith in him because they want Brexit to be done finally. And it's been a long running issue, and by January 31st, Britain was supposed to exit the UK. But right now, because of some arrangements that are taking time with Brussels, it will take even more. So January 31st, they won't be able to leave, but they'll definitely leave. And after leaving also, there's also an 11-month period in which they have to comply with EU regulations. So there's a lot to unpack here, and it will take a separate video to actually understand the entire thing about Brexit. The final thing that you have to see is the year in review. So all the important business events that happened in 2019, it is extremely important to cover. Many times the panel might ask you this question, that in 2019, what are the important business events that happened? What are the important banking events that happened? What are the important judicial events that happened? So you need to understand the landmark rulings, the important decisions, some important mergers or acquisitions, and when they ask you in the interview regarding what the important events actually were. So with this, we'll wrap up this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you in the next video.